Welcome to You and Me Conversations. You and Me is a series of queer BIPOC love stories. These modern entanglements are the kind of romances that make us lose sleep, love letters to the friendships we can't live without, and a celebration of our endless journeys of self-discovery. I wrote this book on a rooftop beneath the moonlight in conversation with my future self. Today, I'm in conversation with you and me. Today, I'm in conversation with Bonnibel. Bonnibel is a writer, artist, and critical theorist behind the YouTube channel Writer Bonnibel. Bonni is passionate about finding new possibilities for solidarity and liberation. You'll find all the links to connect with them in the show notes. Enjoy. I had the privilege of meeting Bonnibel in our McCormick writing retreat this winter. And soon after we had our own conversation, we thought we must record a conversation with you guys. So welcome to our You and Me. So I sent you a couple chapters. I would love to know what you thought.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and have this conversation with you. I love the chapters that you sent me. I think they're two stories that are like they have like completely different approaches, and I love that. One of them just is in the span, I think, of just a couple of days without any continuation, and I think that's the point, like just living in the moment. And the other is you have then 10 years after that, 30 years after that, and you really show the authenticity and the whole messy, like you don't shy away from all of the messy situations of like queer relationships in whatever form, right? And I love that so much. There's this one passage that almost made me tear up. Like I just loved it so much. And yeah, I think before we recorded this, I showed you which passage that was, and I
Mhm.
would like you to read it if you don't mind.
I know it was kind of a surprise. So when I was reading it too, I kind of teared up. I was remembering it, which is good. It's good to know that the emotional intent will transfer even years later, even to the writer. That I still felt it. So yeah, I will read it for everyone. So Bonnie picked a passage from Luna and Nora, and it goes like this. I hesitated at first, introducing the children. I didn't know that world, had never done it before. Didn't know what the right way was, if there even was one. I started by introducing her as my friend, until one day my eldest, Lila, said, I love how Luna loves you. And I started to cry. She noticed. She noticed her mother being loved, fully, completely. It broke my heart that she hadn't witnessed that type of love in our home when I was with David. Seeing her mom be loved, seeing their mom be worthy of this type of devotional love. I needed my kids to see that. See love personified in the home, a family created in its honor, chosen actively, not by accident, but by choice. The choosing of each other, the choosing of grace when we faltered, the choosing of loving ourselves so deep that it only made our love for each other stronger. When the kids saw that with us, it became their new imprint of love. There it is.
Lovely, lovely. That's good. That's beautiful. And thank you for writing that and reading that just now.
Yeah, so that chapter definitely talks about divorce. And I think in divorce, there's always this conversation about what about the kids? And that was my way of reimagining what about the kids? Because in life, when they are older in their own journeys, they will come to points where they have to make hard decisions. And sometimes the easy choice is the wrong choice, and sometimes the hard choice is the right choice. And so I always ask, is this the right hard? And usually that involves a conversation with your future self. It involves an honest conversation with your future self saying, do I go to the things that I'm patterned to? Do I go towards the things that are easy but harming me? Because that's what my body and my imprints know? Or do I take the risk of doing something that is exceptionally hard to bet on the parts of me that haven't had a moment to shine, haven't had a moment to be loved. And so I think in these settings, when you have that with yourself, and if you have children and they witness you do that, that gives them the muscles and inventory that in their future lives, they are also able to make the hard right choices. They are also able to redefine what it looks like when you stay and redefine what it looks like when you go, based on values that, align with who they want to be. So that's what that tried to do.
I want to ask though, because like
Yeah.
this is a collection of short stories, right?
Mhm.
Did how did you know that you wanted to write this? Like, did just one story come to you first, and then you have other ideas, and then like, okay, maybe you should make it a collection, or like, how did you?
They're written as short stories, but they weren't short stories in the sense that I think of like a group of friends or a group of chosen family, and then you get to really focus on like certain characters at a time. The reason why I like that approach is because I'm deeply nosy and curious, which meant I like needed to go deeper. Like I wanted to know what relationship and relating looks like in all of these different settings. I didn't want to just focus on just one because I wanted to show a multitude of approaches and ways and outcomes, really, and define them all under this love umbrella. Even the relationships that are platonic, like it's all love. What does love look like in its many shades, in its many interpretations, and its many journeys?
I really appreciate that you sent me two chapters. That way I know that it's like, oh, okay, so these are like different approaches and different patterns, different perspectives on love, right?
Once it was picked up by Generous Press and we started working on it, the shape and form and really its purpose got stronger and stronger. An idea and then a set of ideas and then a collection of stories suddenly had a very clear point of view. And I think that that's a good thing to know. That through the journey, it will keep evolving. Like the first words and the final words are going to be quite far from each other in the best ways, in the ways that you will get so much clearer on your voice and your point of view and your purpose of why you're even doing this. And then it will take its own shape. But I didn't start there. And so I think that's kind of a good thing to know. I think sometimes we think we have to know everything before we do anything. And that's just impossible. And it will like leave us stuck in that starting phase. Even with relationships, because this is a romance book, even in real life relationships, this constant needing to know everything and have everything guaranteed will keep us from experiencing what we were meant to experience. And I think that it's the same in these regards. Like most time, the risk is part of the magic. Like even trust, like I have to trust you to see if I can trust you, you know? So it's
Mhm.
like this constant idea, like, am I gonna trust you? Well, part of that is the risk. Like I have to first give you something to trust you with and see, oh, did you break my trust or are we going to learn from this and what or give and I'm sometimes have to give you opportunities to break my trust so that we can learn if there's trust in this relationship. And so risk is like a critical component to getting anything, practically speaking, and if we talk about relationships and how we come together.
Yeah, I love that because like you're seeing, craft as inviting and also relationships and like life in general and journey as in like, they're just different modes of the same thing, like trusting, taking risk and trusting people, right? And it's interesting how you mentioned that it started as kind of an accident because like that's how my writing journey started.
Yeah,
Because like
tell
I,
me.
I I was originally I came from more of a film background, not really a background. Like it was like I was just making films for fun, right? With a couple of friends. And we released it uh on YouTube and then actually a publisher saw it. An editor contacted me. We would love if you're interested in publishing a novel based on this film. I'm not a novelist. Do I want to hand this off to like a more proper, like a more capable novelist with like no, you know what? This is my story. I want to write it. So I tried writing it. They actually put me through, editorial help, but also workshops. But at the time, it was meant for films, so I kind of like learned both worlds at the same time, which I just immensely grateful for them to have discovered me and really encouraged me to hone my craft back then. So I got my first novel published, and then it completely flopped, sadly.
Oh.
So it was more of a collection of short stories. It was like a lot more chronological. Like the overarching theme was that they're trying to prepare for a show, like a cosplay show. Because it flopped, like I meant to write sequels,
Mhm.
but because it didn't sell, and I think the publisher and I eventually had different directions on what be able to like make it sell. Unfortunately, we didn't continue.
Tell me what that was like for you in the sense of like when you say flop, what does flop mean? Was it a sales thing or did you like was it like in the finished product you felt like distance? Like
No, actually, I kind of like the finished product. Like
okay, so
right
that's what
now,
I'm wondering. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Just in terms of sales, it didn't sell enough to warrant a sequel. I guess
Mm,
I should put it that way. Yeah.
okay. That's so interesting. And then in terms of how the story came up, would you change it in any way now if you were going to revise that novel? Is there something you know now that you would look back or look at that?
So that's interesting, right? And I'm really happy that you asked me that because I would definitely write it in a different way, but not in a way that my editor would have liked me to write it because like again, no shade to the editor. I think he was an amazing editor, but like his perspective of like was how can we make this book sell? Right? It's like
Mm.
okay, more he kept saying more of like, give the main character more ghosts, more like tragic backstories, give it more conflict, more of the like that kind of approach, like really which I have come to learn eventually that it's like it's more of a Western storytelling. It's more of a, like this individual overcoming obstacles kind of thing. Well, I really wanted to keep her as more of the naive main character, learning about life, learning about what she actually wants. So like the main character doesn't even want anything in my
Mm.
story. And I want to keep it that way. She's like a high school kid who's just trying to figure out what she wants. And
Yeah.
she does that by talking to her friends. And I
Yeah.
like that. I like that aspect of it, but it's not the kind that's like, oh, this is gonna sell because it's so thrilling and so page turning. It's not that kind of book.
Kind of this formulaic way that you have to tell your story sometimes takes the essence away of the type of story you want to tell. I think that in that vein, like a lot, like 3 chapters of the story I wrote before I gave it to anyone to touch, and the rest I developed a while with my publishers, but they really clearly knew how I was going to tell the story, and we worked around that. And there were certain things that I was experimenting with that we had to like find a compromise. There's one chapter that for 3 or 4 pages was dialogue only with no reference to who was speaking because the dialogue was so rapid that I was like playing with the idea that we could follow it. And then later in editing, they were like, add a cue. But it was just that, which is just like to make it the readability easier, but really not change the form of the way in which I wanted to tell these stories. And so I'm like, I think I asked that question of you because I was curious, like, were you able to tell it in your voice the way you wanted to tell it? And if not, is there an opportunity to rewrite
Mhm.
it?
I've been considering a rewrite because like that first novel was written in Bahasa Indonesia, but like yeah, maybe one day I'll write it in English or like it's one of those things, right? Like I'm quite proud of how it turned out, but also it had like a lot of flaws since I was like I was a beginning, yeah, I was such a beginner writer back then. But what actually motivates you to experiment with certain
Is
forms?
that
Do you
I'll have characters like drop into my head, or like I'll suddenly see a scene
mm,
and I'm like, oh, what's happening? So I'm almost watching a show in my brain and then transcribing it. So the form kind of takes the shape of whatever I'm seeing. So in that scene that I was just discussing it's between Birdie and Hava, it's their chapter. I saw this conversation. I saw the first question, which is, what is the worst thing an ex has called you? Which is like kind of a hilarious way to start a conversation. And right to the point, which already like put them off on this type of banter. So I just like listen to them in my head, is the way I can tell you, and transcribe their conversation. after that, after it kind of has a little bit of legs, then I start to think, well, how do I'm going to form this story? I'm going to do a dual point of view, like whatever, where are they going to go? But the original like inspiration usually comes in this kind of random form of like dropping into my head. Luna and Noor, which you read, which is like an app, right? So I was like just
Mhm.
picturing when you're like setting up your profile. And so I was like just in that world of like, oh, how do I answer these questions? Let me ask my group chat. And so that's why it flips to like putting a profile together, going to your group chat. And like that's kind of just realistic of how that goes now, at least in my life, where I consult the group chat for all of these things. So the form kind of took shape because a story fell into my head in a
Mhm.
certain way, and then it does that, and then certain stories then will have to be rearranged later. So there's a
Mhm.
chapter at the end of the book which is Takaya and Goli, and the original scene, the way it started, was these two women trapped in an elevator together, and that was their meet cute. Then later, through editing, and we ended up changing the order in which, just so it flowed in a different sequence. But that's kind of how it happens. So the original inspiration is like this form, and then later when it has legs, I step back and I look at the story as the whole form and like how is the best arrangement for it. It wasn't on purpose necessarily. It was just that couple story took shape in this way, and I let it lead me. And only after it had a form did I step back and try to organize it. But in the creation process, I don't really get in its way. I'm like, it just wants to do
Okay.
this. I let it do it. And only later do I let my brain come in and like think about it differently. But I think in creation, there's other parts of you that take over, and I kind of let them drive until it becomes a more practical matter. And then you got to get your brain involved to like make it work.
What's been the most impactful for you, and what's been the most challenging for you to write?
The most impactful part of writing for me is that I loved it. I really loved it. It literally changed the course of how I imagine my career. Over the last 4 years, it changed everything
Mhm.
because of how much I loved it. It was really unexpected. When I'm in the place of writing, I feel the most content that I've ever felt. I've had a really amazing career doing really amazing things for a lot of amazing people that I feel really fortunate and really impactful work, I would even say. But I've never had this joy. And I think it's because it's finally the intersection between creativity and impact for me. A lot of my work has been impact driven because of my background and experience. And so it was the driver, but creativity had a like was like yearning. Like there was a longing. There
Yeah.
was like a desperation to like do something creative. And at one point when I was in my early 30s, I had a sustainable fashion line, which had that hopes of like integrating like impact and creativity. And so this is like a place where I feel like they get to intersect again and like have a happy union. And that was my greatest realization and really hopefully new direction.
Um, the intersection of creativity and in impact, that's always been my calling.
Mhm.
Also, that's why I'm doing the things that I do. Storytelling for activism. I think I've mentioned that before. I wrote a whole comic series on sustainable fashion, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did that. The most challenging part of writing is just like being haunted by all the things that you have in your head that you might not get to write because you have to choose what do you really want to focus on for this for the next couple of years, right?
Oh.
Okay, maybe like I can't choose one. Okay, then choose two, but then it might take more years to complete. Like then you have to put off some other projects that you really, really want to do. So that's the first challenge. And the second challenge is, I guess, I can get so involved in my writing that sometimes I wouldn't say re-traumatizing. I think I am at a point where I am able to process things properly and put them into writing properly, but then I have to like go through them again to make them actually coherent and readable for readers. That's why I think my form first approach is also informed by that experience. Because like if I do um, emotion first, then I can it goes all over the place basically. But if I have a certain form, a certain target, a certain format, a certain deadline, like some kind of structure to really organize my thoughts, my ideas, then I could, feel a lot more safe in exploring those emotions, right? Because yeah, otherwise I can write passages that make me cry, but then when I hand them over to other people, they get confused because like, okay, this okay. Then I read again. Oh yeah, you're right. This is actually kind of a mess.
Oh no. It's so interesting. Something you said reminds me of something my grandmother used to say. She used to like be in a library or look at books, and she's like, "Oh, doesn't this depress you?" And I would be like, "Why?" And she's like, "Because like we will never be able to read all these books." It's kind of like you being like, "I will never be able to tell all these stories," which is an interesting ache, I guess, to have. That's so interesting. I don't know if I don't have that. I guess because I'm kind of hyper focused on a certain story that I have other ideas that go other places. Like I say, I kind of put them aside. But I think when I'm writing, it's a hyper focus moment.
Mhm. Something that I have yet to commit myself to, and I really want to, but I'm still scared, is to make a proper graphic novel with like hundreds of pages, because
Mhm.
that's gonna take years of my life. I have to
Mhm.
really, really focus on just one project, right? And I think it's for me at least, it's a heavier, it's a heavier demand than writing a novel, at least like time-wise and effort-wise, because I really need to like, I need to draw everything up.
Okay, so in closing of our delicious conversation, I want to know in all of these creative ideas and projects you have, what is the story you really want to tell?
So that's a difficult question, right? Because yeah, there's no single story that I want. I mean, there are a couple of them in my head. What's most important to me is more about the values or like the threads, the commonalities between all of the stories I write is like I tend to write not necessarily dystopia, but like a world in on the brink or like in the aftermath, either like on the brink going to be destroyed or like after they're destroyed but still on that brink. But like there's that and like there's a lot of trauma, but there's a lot of hope as well. And I think at the end of the day, what I wanted to keep telling is that you can carry trauma, you can carry that kind of weight, that kind of like grief with you, but it does not foreclose the possibility of hope, right? And when you hope, when you have hope, it does not erase the trauma. It does not cover over any kind of grief. Like you can carry both at the same time.
Mhm.
And I think that's why I also feel a kinship with your stories because I can
Mhm.
really feel that. Yeah, would you say
Really.
would you say that's the same with
Yeah,
you as well?
I really appreciate that. That's exactly where we intersected. And I think that's where the art matters, I think, to both of us. And that's why we had this conversation, is how to use art as a vehicle for change and to use hope and possibility as the medicine. So yeah, that's definitely how I think that like where we intersect on like what we want to create. And I think that's where we talked about like creativity and impact coming together. I think
Mhm,
when I've been looking and talking about you and me and thinking about writing, as like, what am I writing? All of this writing, what is it for? I've kind of keep circling around a certain theme that I worked on in a workshop this weekend and has come up a couple times after. So, I think I'm saying it more and more and louder, and this is and again today, but is that I think my focus is on writing on how we love ourselves and each other through our seasons. And I'm really committed to this theme. I'm really curious about how we relearn ourselves and rediscover ourselves and with each other, and how we keep meeting through the seasons. I think the work of loving each other for, through, and with seasons is how we all get free.
mhm. I love that a lot also that I should probably mention about your writing is that I don't, they're not necessarily, they're definitely not pure characters, but they're also not flawed in the traditional sense of like writing. They're just rediscovering themselves, and each story is kind of a story about a revelation and a change in perspective, I should say,
Yeah.
instead of like the characters moving and resolving conflict. It's more about the characters relearning themselves, relearning um, love and hope and joy, and how they relate to other people, how they can learn more about the forms of connections they have with other people, whether that's just like fleeting or that last decades, right? It's beautiful because I think there's a lot of discourse around the idea of like, you know, being queer that's like more pure than another, and it's like you have to just be dedicated to this form. It's just like
Hmm.
no, that's really limiting. Like you don't gatekeep queerness. The whole thing about queerness is like breaking down the gates, right?
Right,
And I
right.
think you really managed to show that really well in your story. So
Yeah.
I love that.
And queerness is so much more than sexuality. It's really like a political,
Yeah,
social, economic stance. And so I
yeah.
think that like it shows up in how we live our lives as well, not just who
Mm,
we sleep with. And
mm,
I think that's what I want to show with the characters is like their values, their principles, the things that they stand for, and the way
mm.
that they fight for themselves and the ones they love. I hope it did that. Well, thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, thank you as
Hope to
well.
have many, many more. And I hope that everyone engages with your YouTube channel and see your amazing work
Thank
there.
you.
And then we'll link
Thank
your
you so much.
website and you can see your beautiful works of art as well. Until next time.
Thank
Wait,
you so
I can
much.
do hearts now. Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you.